Good morning, everyone. My name is Clayton Lulin, and I'm the Marketing Manager at Family Office Metrics. I'd like to welcome you to the second in this three-part series of webinars, Finding, Optimizing, and Rewarding Talent in the Family Office. But before we get underway, I've got a few bits of housekeeping that I need to cover. We are offering CPE credits for today's webinar. To receive your 2 credit hours, you must stay online through the entire presentation, answer all of our poll questions we asked during the webinar, and then complete a quick survey that will appear after the webinar is over or when you close the webinar window. One of those survey questions will ask if you would like to receive CPE credit, so make sure to mark that yes if you would like to receive your credits. Once you do those things, I will send you a link to complete your $49 payment, and then you will receive your CPE certificate via email. This webinar is being recorded, so if you have to leave early or get disconnected, you will receive an email with a link to view the recording. Note that you cannot receive CPE credit for viewing the recording. There will be a Q&A session with John following the webinar, so please ask your questions via the Questions tab on the GoToWebinar software. If for any reason we don't get to your question during the webinar, we will follow up with you afterwards. Don't forget to check out our website, FamilyOfficeMetrics.com, where you can register for all of our events and upcoming speaking engagements, not to mention submit your resume or position descriptions and be a part of our executive placement program. Our website is also the best place to get details on the many consulting services FOM has to offer SFOs, wealth advisors, as well as technology and service providers. It is now my pleasure to welcome John Carroll, the founder and CEO of Family Office Metrics. Good morning, John.
Introduction. Good morning, Clayton, and thank you for that introduction, and good morning to all our listeners. And as Clayton said, we will have a Q&A at the end of the session today, so if you have questions as you go along, please key those in, and we'll get to them at the end. I'll leave a few minutes at the end. Just want to say one word about our business. The vision for our business is that we are problem solvers at Family Office Metrics, and our goal is always to achieve the best total solution at the lowest cost and the least amount of risk for you, our client. We concentrate on the family office, and we're conflict-free, independent, and objective. And our goal really is to help our clients prosper. We engage in management consulting, research, and education. This is an example of an educational outreach that we do, this webinar. And we also have last year started into formal executive search. So this webinar ties in nicely with some of the things we've learned over the years about executives and families in the family office industry, and we're hoping through this 3-part series to give you some pointers and examples on how, whether you're a buyer or a seller, to do the right thing, to find the right opportunity to improve your current situation. In this 3-part series today, we're on the second topic, and we're going to cover optimizing talent, managing human resources in the family office. Next time, I think our webinar will be on rewarding, and will be focused almost entirely on compensation, data we've gathered around compensation, and plans for you to improve your compensation programs in line with what's going on in the industry. And so be sure and tune in for that one. I think that's in June, but we'll have a precise date on that at the end of this webinar. But today, we're going to talk about optimizing the talent in the family office and managing human resources. So Clayton, let's go to the next slide. And today's agenda will cover, after a brief introduction, 3 topics in depth. One is organizational structures. The second is position descriptions and role charters, which is an evolution of the position description. And third and finally, we're going to talk about goals and performance setting, goal setting and performance measurement in the family office. So those are our 3 topics on our agenda today: organizational structures, position descriptions, and role charters, goals and performance. And at the end, as I mentioned, we'll have a 10-minute or so Q&A session. So please, if you have questions, just jot those down into the GoToWebinar chat box and punch send, and Clayton will get those questions and ask ask them of me at the end. So let's go to the next slide, Clayton, and take a look at purpose of the series. The purpose of our series, as I mentioned, is to inform both buyers and sellers in the single-family office. And buyers, of course, are the family itself, or himself or herself, the board of trustees, the board of directors, the individual trustee or a board of trustees, and the executive. So all of those positions and people are looking potentially to enhance the performance of their office by identifying and selecting human resources. And on the other side of that equation, of course, are those people who are selling themselves as human resources, and those are the candidates. And while I don't mean to be brusque about putting it in those terms, I think it is important to remember that it is a market, and one of the things that we're trying to do with this series is to enlighten both sides about how they can most effectively interact. And I would refer you to our thinking that we've published in the past and done some webinars on, but I think buyers are principally focused on 3 attributes of human resources, and also 3 attributes in their family office. And those 3 attributes are: 1, quality; 2, security; 3, control. So quality, security, and control are what drive families and responsible parties, boards and trustees and executives, to seek out the very best human resources to work within the office structure, and also to seek out and work with the very best operations, banking, and technology providers. Likewise, I think it's important to remember that sellers or candidates or employees, whether they be executives or staff, or even trustees or board members, are really selling a professional service to the family. They're not selling necessarily what the family is buying. And as I said, families are buying quality, security, and control. Sellers are selling professional services. And I think it's important for the market to function effectively and efficiently, for sellers to recognize how to translate their professional services offering into quality, security, and control, and also for families and buyers generally in the family office to understand how they translate their needs for quality, security, and control into the purchase and the retention of professional services. And that's one of the principal objectives that we're going to accomplish in our webinar series and in this webinar today. So let's go to the next slide, Clayton. I'll talk for a second about the origin of our executive search business. I mentioned at the outset we do consulting, research, and education, and last year we began formally our executive search process, and I mentioned that this webinar is an outgrowth of that. Our consulting method is based loosely on the Deming method of plan, do, study, act, and in fact we've adapted that method to say that we plan, we assess, we change, and we review, and then back to the planning cycle. So that's our planning cycle that we work with our clients on whatever type of consulting work we're doing. And I think that that has also naturally and intuitively and easily brought us into our consulting focus, which is really on the people, the process, and the technology in the family office. And so as management consultants, we're focused on people, process, and technology. Heretofore, we focused mostly on process and mostly on technology. And over the last 4 or 5 years, we've begun much more to realize our potential in working with families around management and governance. And in last year, we started the focus to work with families on the search, selection, and hiring of people. Next slide, Clayton, will show just some of the work that we've been doing. Last year, we successfully were involved in the search and selection and placement of an interim CEO in a single-family office, a single-family office CFO, and a single-family office investment committee member. This year, we've got more than 4 searches underway. Some are in, a couple are in the stages of being closed out, but so they're not really open now. But right now, we've got open a search for a CEO, a search for a director of family services, a search for a controller, and a search for an accounting manager. So any of those positions appeal to you and you think you may be interested in learning more, give us a ring, or if you know somebody, please put them in touch with us. And of course, if you're looking for family office executives or advisors, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We also know a significant number of professionals who are very, very willing to serve in advisory capacities on committees and as advisors to families, and these people have deep, deep backgrounds in investments, in accounting, in the law, in family governance, and would welcome the opportunity to work with your family office. So give us a buzz if any of this makes sense to you. So Clayton, let's go on to our first question. And our first question today then is, why are you here? And how would you describe yourself? So I know you're here, so how would you describe yourself? Would you describe yourself as a candidate seeking a position, as a family seeking a candidate, as an interested party, or none of the above? And so let's give a minute to collate the results. Just shouldn't take too long for you to click the button whether you're a candidate seeking a position, you characterize yourself as a family member, somebody looking for another person to hire into your family office, an interested party, which means that you're neither of the above, but you're interested in the topic, or none of the above. So then if you're none of the above, I wonder why you're here, but I guess it's possible. So Clayton, what do you think? We have enough time to get our answers collated there? Yes, we did. Okay, wow. So quite a few of you are none of the above, and that means that I haven't done a very good job of asking that question, but that's kind of shocking to me, I must admit. And so I will be interested, for those of you who answered none of the above, please drop me a note to us and tell us, how you would describe yourself if not in one of those categories. So I'd be really interested, because the goal, of course, is to have none of the above be the smallest answer on. But interesting and very surprising, in fact, shocking answer to my question. So let's move on to our first topic for today, organizational structures. And we're going to talk about how to recognize and define the most common family office structures. I think this is important for all of you because you need to know how to describe yourself if you're looking for somebody. Also, how to identify the structure that you're talking to if you're a candidate. So in any case, I think it makes sense to start talking about organizational structures by first talking about governance structures. And what we've done is recently gone through and tallied up the governance structures, or how we would characterize the governance structures of the clients of Family Office Metrics. So next slide, Clayton. Let's take a look at that, which is showing our governance structures, and we are missing the chart, but I will fill in the bar chart for you. The bar chart is there. Good. Most of our clients are what we would describe as command and control governance structures. Second in popularity would be, but just about equal with the third approach, is corporate, and followed by, as I mentioned, the third approach, shared responsibility. So command and control of, fully 6 out of 10 of our family office clients, and this is 161 clients, follow what I would call a command and control structure. So basically, command and control structure is extremely hierarchical and centered on one leader. And here I've described this principal calls all the shots, and typically the first generation is still in the mix, or the older generation is still in the mix, and approving all major changes, expenditures, activities in the office. Well, maybe not signing every check, but definitely overseeing everything that goes on in the office, and so all decision-making flows through the principal. The corporate structure is the next most popular. As you can see, 22, about 1 in 5 take advantage of that, along with a 1 in 5 roughly shared responsibility. Corporate structure is more like we're used to in corporate America, where we have a board, we have a CEO reporting to the board, we have committees of the board, we have people reporting to the CEO, and that is a very, I think, well understood structure. The shared responsibility structure is maybe less well known, but maybe familiar to some of you. 1 in 5 of our clients uses the collaborative approach to management, and so decisions are taken by a group, by consensus, and oftentimes that's represented as a family council. So, thinking about governance, I think, is important. That's sort of at the highest level. Let's take a look on the next slide, Clayton, at the types of structures that are basically available, in the family office, and I think these are fairly recognizable to you. That you've got the flat structure, which I'd say is probably the most prevalent, where you've got a leader, an owner, an MD, somebody who is running essentially functional areas. So you've got the CFO reporting in, the CIO reporting in, the tax manager reporting in, the client service reporting in, and the like. And that could include operating companies, residence managers. But the point is that in a flat structure, I think it's much more horizontal, and it's open much more to consensus. I know the academics call this post-bureaucratic. That might even be, I guess it couldn't be pre-bureaucratic, but I think it's probably one of the older forms of human organization, which is, people agree to sort of specialize and take on responsibilities working under the leadership of one. The second type of structure that we'll see from time to time is what you might call a distributed or a tall structure. It's more vertical. You can see that you've got a divisional, sort of a silo-oriented, and a little more complex, because you've got different and competing groups who may sometimes have very different objectives. One of the ways you could think about this, and sometimes even think about this in terms of your own flat structure, in terms of a hybrid, is you got the investment team on one side and you've got the financial team on the other. That's a very, very common sort of semi-vertical or hybrid structure, where there are very, very different objectives, very, very different compensation schemes, very, very different focus, business focus by the group. So this is a little more complex, requires a lot more energy on behalf of the person managing overall. So it is much more complex than the flat structure, which is more consensual. And then the third structure, of course, is matrix, which sort of was in vogue, I think, back when I was in corporate America. I know I think it's fallen out of vogue now. It just is, it's sort of the dotted line approach. Like, I work for you, but then I got a dotted line to the family. I'm the CFO or I'm the treasurer, and I've got a dotted line to the CEO, but I've got a dotted line to the family. And one of the challenges in a matrix organization is that there's often a lack of clarity, and while it does allow for more specialization and sort of a project orientation, there's often a lack of clarity, and goals can be confused. So those are the governance structures, and then the three sort of basic business structures: flat, tall, and matrix. Let's go to the second question, Clayton, and why don't you, out there in the audience, let us know how you would describe your family office. How would you describe your family office structure? Flat, as I've described it, sort of one leader and everybody reporting into the one leader. Could be the principal, could be the GM, could be the owner. A tall structure where there's, let's say, more of a corporate sort of organization, and especially distributed where you've got different and similar roles supporting multiple responsibilities, like investments has their own operation team separate and apart from finance, who has their operations team, and treasury, who has their operations team, or a matrix where everybody sort of works for everybody is kind of the way I describe it. It's a dotted line. Or, of course, none of the above. And if I get mostly none of the above on this question, I'm gonna be really surprised. But it won't be the first time I've been really surprised. So, Clayton, have we had enough time to tally? Yes, we have. And okay, as expected, most of you, just like our clients, I think it was, what did I say, 59% of our clients, or 61%, or something like that, follow a command and control, or more of a flat structure. Very, very consistent with all of you out there. But interestingly enough, almost 1 in 5 are involved in a matrix structure, and that is a challenge. But let's focus on the bulk of you, the 6 out of 10 who are working in a flat structure. Going to the next slide, we'll talk about the pros and cons of the flat structure. And this is, based upon, my experience. I would say virtually all of our clients are use this flat organizational structure or hybrid in some way, as I described. The pros are that flat structure, close to the family, close to the action. You're right in there. You know what's going on. I think there's a real opportunity to balance specialization and also the collaboration between build teams. So you've got your CFO and your tax manager collaborating on a project to estimate taxes. You've got your investment team and your CFO collaborating, each specializing on their area, but collaborating on the need to forecast cash flows. And the flat structure really, when done properly, can create very, very open communication and effective collaboration. Of course, the cons of the contra against flat structure is just the same as the pro. You're close to the family, close to the action, and sometimes that can be overwhelming, overbearing. I think that sometimes in that situation, and especially when you are close to the family or close to the principal who is used to immediate action and response, you'll have multiple people working on the same directive. And I think that sometimes when it's not properly managed, I think that a command and control structure, a flat structure, can really end up creating silos and where people are not communicating. So the benefits of it can also be the detriments. And so I encourage you to to think about keeping a flat structure well balanced. And if we go to the next slide, I'm recommending that you consider this in terms of the benefits. And what I like about the flat structure: clear lines of responsibility, authority, focus, control through the executive. And the flat structure, I think, as most of you recognize, provides a very nimble, responsive, flexible capability to the client family. And for the family office, I think it allows the people, even though there may be just a few people in the office, to specialize and to focus on what they do best. And it well done and balanced properly, the structure permits, allows, and encourages teamwork. And as a result, will allow the family and the executive in charge to reward teamwork and to recognize individual accomplishments. So flat structure, I think, is the most widely used. There are serious and significant benefits to using it, and I would say that it works best, the flat structure, when positions are well defined. So let's move on from that well-said segue into the next topic, which is how to match position descriptions with skills and experience in the office. And I think that position descriptions have always played a significant role in an effective management framework and in managing the business. I think that our opinions as business people have changed over the years about position descriptions, and we're going to discuss sort of my view on them. And I will say that I think the jury is still a little bit out on exactly how to do it. So I think that this is more, what we're going to talk about here is more prescriptive than descriptive. I think we're going to say, you should focus on this and you should do something, but precisely how you do it, I think we're going to give you some approaches to and some guidance based upon what we've learned in our working with families on how to do it. So let's go to the next slide, Clayton. Excuse me. Next slide. Thank you. I want to say that position descriptions as a tool are evolving, and it would not surprise me at all if many of you and your offices don't have formal position descriptions. And I think that's, I think that may be more prevalent than we would like to admit. An old partner of mine in the business, one of my first partners in the business, Jim Jones, attorney, fifth generation Texan, was working with a family down in Texas, and I just remember this very, very clearly. He said, "John, these two guys have been in business forever, 40 years in the oil and gas business. They've built a huge multi-billion-dollar company, and they have no agreement between them." Now that's a little bit different than not having a position description, but it's sort of the other end of this lady in the cartoon. They knew exactly what they were going to do, and they were able to navigate life and their business and each other very, very successfully over a lifetime without written agreements. Now, most people are not quite that capable, and like the lady in the cartoon says, what will I do now? How will I know what to do? I think most of us will know what to do with our lives without a position description. So that's kind of a spoof. But I think that, historically, the position description has filled a role to describe, what the manager, what management, what the family expects of the employee. And where I've seen this situation, the most egregious example of the situation is a position description for the chief executive. Very few chief executives have position descriptions or role charters, or even a little more than just a list of objectives or a handshake. And hey, the whole point here is not that you need to do this to fill up paper in a notebook or documents on your shared drive. The whole point is when things go south, when there's a problem, you've got something to turn to say, this is what we agreed to. Now, many of you might say, just like the two gentlemen that were in business for 40 years and built a huge business, look, if it's, you know, a piece of paper is not going to help us do that. It's not going to help us solve a problem that goes south. But I might say that in some cases it will, and I'm going to give you an example of that in a minute. But I think that the academics and the consultants have evolved beyond the position description, and so have we. I don't want to make too big of a deal out of the role charter. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about it, but I think it's important that to link the role charter and the activities described in the role charter, which are sort of position description activities. If you look down at roles and collaboration, you know, your accountabilities, your decision-making authority, how far do you get, you know, what do you make decisions on, and, you know, what are the key performance indicators, how do we measure your performance, and matching, you know, your capabilities with role requirements, and all of that within the context of the structure, financial accountability, governance, strategic goals for the office. I think that is a really good thing, because whether it's a position description, a role charter, or just a document that you don't call either one of those things, but that you agree with your counterpart, it's really important to describe how the work that person is doing relates to the overall. And so let's take a look on the next slide, Clayton, at the pros and cons of the role charter. And the role charter is sort of as I said, is an evolution of the position description. It's focused on defining what the what the objectives are, more so than what the tasks are. And it is a really good tool for setting goals and especially for measuring performance against those goals. Part of it is that it requires management, the family. It requires some collaborative effort, no doubt, with the employee or with the executive to determine what are the KPIs, what are the metrics we're going to measure to gauge success. They could be financial, they could be service related, they could be quality related. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that there are KPIs in place that fairly represent, the objectives of the position, and who owns the objective and who influences the objective. I know when we're talking to prospective clients, we're always trying to sort out, is this the person that can make a decision, or is this the person that influences a decision? And the employees and staff and chief executives in many cases either own or they influence decisions. I think it's really important to spell that out, especially for critical areas that are important to the leadership, that you are clear about the fact that you own it or they own it or somebody else owns it and that you're influencing and collaborating. So critical work to find. And I think the challenge in all of this, and it's a little bit, it sounds a little bit academic, is that it's sort of a rehash of, measuring directly by these KPIs or these objectives. You got to be really, really careful not to motivate and instigate activity that leads to consequences that you didn't plan on. So focusing too much on objectives and not adding enough of leadership and self-reliance and education into the charter will really point in the wrong direction. So again, I'm saying I think the role charter is good. I think position descriptions are good. I think there's an evolution going on. What I'm urging you to do is to think about linking the work that's done at the lowest level to the strategic objectives in the office and for the family, the vision for the family. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see that one of my heroes, W. Edwards Deming, who lived a long life, offered up 14 principles. I encourage you, if you have never looked at Deming's work, a great little summary. He wrote a ton of books. He was essentially responsible for starting the whole TQM movement, and sort of contra Drucker with MBOs, and said, really it's about leadership. So I think Drucker and Deming together in a mix, and a hybrid mix, will provide you with really good thinking about how to manage your people. But some of the principles, 3 of the 14 principles that he proposed to transform business and make business more effective. One was, engage in training on the job. I can't stress how important that is, and give people a chance to stretch out. If you buy a new software, send them or help them improve. Let them learn on the job. Give them a model. Build this model. Talk to this attorney and see if you can't figure out the fact pattern of work. Give them do the due diligence on this deal and come back to me with what you think. So engaging your team in on the job training is really, really important. And encouraging people to pursue self-improvement, education, examples, continuing professional education, night school, another degree, you name it, whatever it is, keeping the learning environment open in your business, no matter how small. I mean, it's just 5 people. It makes a big difference. And then third, break down barriers between departments. These are 3 lessons that I think are sort of common sense, but we forget about them. And these are the things that sort of always go to the back of the list when we're talking with people about their position description. So if you don't have something like this, something about training, about education, about collaboration built into your MBO, built into your position description, built into your role charter, your performance evaluation mechanism with the family, if you're the CEO, or with your CEO, if you're management, you need to do that. And because if you're not, you're missing big time. So let's go to the next question in our set of questions. And this is, as I said, I'm going to be surprised if most people answer yes. I'm guessing that most people will answer no. And when I say position descriptions, I mean just just a basic position description, or something like a role charter, or just a list of objectives, or somehow relating, the position to the strategy in the, on the overall vision, or how it all fits together. And when I say critical position, I am including senior management, and I'm including the CEO or the managing director. I'm including the person at the top of the food chain there in terms of the family office. So if you're answering for your office and everybody in your office has got one, but you don't get to answer yes. You have to answer no. Well, look at that, split. Very good. Excellent. And I'm very happy to see that 4 out of 10, almost, between 4 and 5 out of 10 do have that documentation in place. So that's very encouraging. Those of you who do not, I encourage you to know consciously and specifically why you do not. If you don't know why you don't have them, or if it's just because you never got around to it, not a good answer. So I would encourage you to think about that and maybe put something in action so that year-end 2015 you can refer back, maybe shoot for a mid-year rollout, a 6/30, 7/1 rollout, and get busy on that for the rest of the year. So we're going to do I'm going to take you into a little case now, and we're going to review how a family has put this sort of program into action. And for those, the 4 or 5 out of 10 of you that don't have this in place. I hope this will be instructive, and for those of you that do, I think you'll see that some of the lessons that this family learned are applicable to you. So let's go to the next slide and review the facts of the study. This is basically a large family, very large, with 5 separate and significant households. This is like G3 and G3, I think G3 or G4. And the groups were, not all of the same age cohort. So I think we had some family groups where the principal was his 50s, and some were, a couple where they were in their 30s. So, and as a result, and also because of some of the decisions that family members had made over the years diverged from one another and were not made in concert, but there was a significant portfolio that was held in trust that was binding the family together, and the family was, in a fair amount, active active discussions in their family meetings about the cost of the office and the services provided, and do we need it, and how does that compare to the market, and how can we benchmark it, and so on and so forth. So we worked with them over the course of about a year and a half to go through a number of issues, but one of the issues was to create the background and the backdrop and the data for the family to set a stake in the ground, a benchmark stake in the ground for their 5-year strategic plan. And one of the issues, just one of the issues that we worked with them on was how to raise the quality of client services. And that client service is sort of an amorphous term. Like, what do you mean by that? And people have, everybody you talk to has a different view of how the office is doing and what it should be doing, and how they're doing what they should be doing, and whether or not they're doing things that they shouldn't be doing. And so it really requires a framework to get questions to get to the underlying issues. And so that was, that process led us to a solution, which was to connect the goals that we created from the work that we did, and these were the family goals, through some various measures, they're called KPIs, to the overall strategic plan. So in other words, the strategic plan was not something that was happening independently of the client service. It was not a financial plan. It was an overall family office business plan, strategic business plan that was to include all aspects of the family's work together. And one of those aspects was the interaction between the family office and the family members individually around their affairs. And so, our solution was, after all the work that we did, was to connect the service goals as identified by the family through measurement of performance indicators that supported the strategic plan. So let's go on and next slide, Clayton, and we'll look at how we approach the solution. First thing is we gathered a bunch of information, surveyed everybody in the family. There's about 35 people in the family that we surveyed, adults, and that took a while. Some of those interviews we did over the phone. Most of them we did in person, and some of the family members wanted to respond anonymously. That was okay. We did those electronically. And there was a real need for the family survey results because many of the questions were related, obviously, to the service levels in the family office or by the family office. So there was a need for the commentary and to be kept confidential. I mean, it was a very, I would say kind of a high-charged undertaking, one that required a skill to navigate and the right type of approach to gather the information and present it in a way that was acceptable. But we, in addition to family, we talked to all the executives and did a 360. So in other words, we asked the CFO how he felt about the CEO and the COO how he felt about the CFO and the tax manager how he felt about the COO and on. You know, around so that everybody, so we got a really good view of how the office felt that they were doing. We got a really good view of how the family felt the office was doing. We got a really good view of how the office thought the family thought they were doing. And then we contrasted all that with some interviews with some external third parties who were very active in the family office because we had some attorneys who were serving as trustees, and we had a couple of investment consultants who were very, very active over decades with the family, who had a lot of insight and were able to provide. So anyway, pulled all that together, created a report, presented to the family, and came out with a set of measures that we were able to relate to the strategic plan overall. And, this was a benchmarking exercise in a lot of respects. I mean, people were willing to take the news, whatever the news was, as long as it was honest and clear, we're able to take the news and to run with it and to say, we've got a benchmark in place now. Let's use this information to guide our next steps. And so, if we go on, Clayton, to the next slide, we'll see how we took our balanced scorecard approach and put that together with the specific KPIs and leading to support for the strategic plan. So balanced scorecard means a lot of things to a lot of people, but I think it's a tool that you can use in your family office to successfully focus on the sorts of indicators that are most relevant for your performance, to measure your performance in support of your strategic goals. Now, what it means is you have to have strategic goals. So you've got to have a vision. You've got to be able to say, this is where our office is headed. And if you don't have that, you need to get that. That's the first thing you got to do. But assuming you have that, and the family can clearly express their goals for the future and the role that the family office is going to play in educating the staff, in protecting assets, in providing a secure and safe work environment for a next generation to learn and to participate, to provide the best and the top quality of products and services, whatever they may be, whether they're household services, whether they're investment services, whether they're trust and estates planning services, whether they're the highest quality thinking around deferring tax by managing wealth transfer. I mean, whatever the quality measures are, I think you can translate those quality measures and security and control into this balanced scorecard. And the balanced scorecard has four sort of I would say tranches. You've got your financial and executive goals, you've got your customer relationship goals, you've got your business process, your operations and legal goals, and you've got learning and growth. And this virtuous circle is the way for you to link your strategic goals at the top, whether they're financial, whether they're customer related, whether they're business and operations related, or learning, education related, to the work that you do in the office. And so we've developed this. We've done a number of these with clients. We find it really a successful way to quickly and clearly get to a set of measures. And so, for instance, our family determined that one of the things that they wanted to do was to, every other year do a client satisfaction survey. Once a year they thought was too much, but every other year they wanted to do it, and they wanted to set that in stone to measure the performance, of the office versus client satisfaction goals. And I think that I think that a way that they showed that was to, out of the survey, was to identify, enumerate the number of activities or actions that the family office took arising out of the survey. So, in other words, if the survey showed these 10 things, how many of those 10 things did the client have resolved or have improvements on by the office? And so pulling out directly out of the survey and setting those as goals, I think, is a really clear way to improve the communication and the collaboration between family and family office. One of the things, and you may be thinking about your own office when I mention this, is just the number of client meetings that you have. I know that, especially in larger families like this one was, not everybody got a meeting every year, and that was bad. Everybody should have a meeting every year, at least one meeting every year. Look, if you're the beneficiary of a trust, which all of these people were, the trustee should be meeting with the beneficiaries every year, no doubt, at least once a year. So the fact that we don't have at least an annual meeting is, with a client, is a negative. And I think that this is, taking to the next step, is like some clients maybe want to meet once a quarter. Some may be fine with just once a year. Some may say, all I want is a phone call every month for 15 minutes to just kind of tell me how I'm doing. Whatever it is, but the point is to arrive at the benchmark of the KPI individually for the client and to work towards meeting that goal. One of the things that I've noticed that many family offices do not do, and if you think about your cousins who are in business commercially, like multifamily offices, one of the things they'll do, or think about your accountants, your CPAs. Every year they come to you and they sit down and they do a review of their services with you and agree to the fee schedule. There's no reason why a single-family office shouldn't do the same thing. Absolutely should do the same thing. Talk about continuously reminding your client of your value that you're adding, and also the tremendous benefit that they're getting by having the family office available to them. You do that through the annual review. And I think that all of these are just examples of focus KPIs on the customer. In this case, in this family, we focused in this interest around improving client service on these customer relationship KPIs and also on the learning and growth KPIs. And so training hours for staff and training hours for clients is really important. I mean, it was one of the things that came out in the client survey was that clients really didn't feel competent in a number of areas. They'd get into the big meetings and there'd be discussions about asset allocation or asset location or different styles or strategies or different asset types or different planning strategies, and they felt ill-equipped to to stay up with the conversation. So training and focusing on growing the competency, not only of the next gen, but of the current gen, the now gen, is really important. And I think that if that's the sort of KPI you need to have in your, as I mentioned earlier, you need to do on-the-job training, and you need to be involved in continuous learning. But the same thing is true for your clients. And I don't think there's any reason why that shouldn't be a significant part of the review process or the KPI process that you have with your clients. So balanced scorecard, remember, came from client-derived data, internally derived data about service quality, out of that data, identified these sorts of measures, KPIs, and then these KPIs were aligned and in support of the strategic goals of the office. So, excuse me, the linkage between those elements, I think, is very clear. It's something that we say is key to a successful performance review, performance evaluation. If you're the CEO, I think you should be thinking in these terms as you think about aligning the work that your team does for the family. You should be thinking in these terms about how to communicate the value that you add by running the family office to the family, and you should be thinking in these terms about how to unify vision for the family and mission for the family office. And one of the ways, as I mentioned, that it's a practical way to do that is through writing things down. 4 out of 10 of you are doing that. 4 out of 10 of you are not doing that. For those of you who are not doing that, I encourage you to write those things down and get them in some sort of format that you can review with your team. And if you're a family member and your CEO doesn't have a charter or a description, I definitely encourage you to get some of those points down and to have a review with that team member. So let's go to the next slide, Clayton, which I think is a question, our next question, which is asking, how often are formal, sort of sit-down, written performance reviews done in your office? This may apply only to the 4 out of 10 that actually have written descriptions, but some of you who don't have written descriptions may sit down and write write a memo or something to file and sit down with your team member, your CEO, and review performance. If you're not doing it, you really should be doing it in some way, shape, or form. Even if it's not written, you need to do something to give feedback. Last year, we were involved with a single-family office that was experiencing a generational shift in leadership from the principal generation to next gen, who are in their, we're all well into adulthood, and there was a serious disconnect between the new leadership and family office executive team, and principally because there was basically infrequent or virtually no communication between the new generation taking control of the office and the executive. And that's something that we had to work very, very hard to repair. But once done, things are moving along very, very nicely. And good to see from the polling results that, 4 out of 10 are more frequently than annually. Very, very good. Hats off to you. I think that's terrific. I applaud your attention to your human resources. Without your people in place, without the right people in place, you're not going to get the job done. So very, very good. I'm proud of you. And those people who are doing it annually, hats off to you too. That tells me that almost 8 out of 10 are doing it at least annually, and I think that's great. That's just super, and I'm really glad to hear that. For the 1 in 10 that have never done any such thing or had any such thing done, you need to do it, or you need to take it up with your principal if you are feeling at a disadvantage. But you know, I'm all in favor of documenting things in any case, and especially something as important as the job that I've got or the position that I've got, so that if there is a dispute, I can turn to this document that we agreed to, that I haven't overstepped my bounds or I haven't violated any precept. So the 13%, something to think about. But let's move on to the next section, which is called Goals and Performance, and how to set annual and long-term goals and evaluate performance. And I think this is a lot of this work is based on a case that we were involved in a few years ago, and but I think it's an evergreen, and I think that you'll see the benefit of the approach that we're taking to understanding the relationship between compensation, goals, and performance. So let's go to the next slide, Clayton. This little chart, I think, lays out the relationship pretty nicely between compensation, goals, and performance measurement. And across the top, you see the types of compensation that exist: salary, short-term incentives, long-term incentives, other benefits, and quality of life issues. And performance, it figures into some of those, but not all of them. So of course, your salary is your salary. There's no performance basis to that. But short-term and long-term incentives, there is a performance basis, and or there should be. And other benefits and quality of life, not so much. But you can see that the relationship between the goals that you have and the goals that the family has are, I think, pretty well described here, about the balance between cash payments, direct compensation, and indirect compensation, and then also the quality of life issue. Comes into play when you think about the reward factor, and maybe some of us would like to live, out in the bush in Alaska, but some others would not consider that a quality of life. Some of us might like to live in New York City. Others might think that was absolutely the worst place in the world to live. So quality of life plays a significant role when you're thinking about performance. But when you're there and in place, then you are generally focused on salary and incentives and other benefits as opposed to quality of life. But I mentioned quality of life because it is part of the total reward package. And if your office allows you to work or provides the opportunity to work in a really quality environment, not just the geographical location, but sort of the cultural environment and the social environment, I think that is worth something. And just, we've all had experiences where we haven't had a great quality of life, and that can really take its toll. I think all of us understand, these categories. Salary, that's your, cash payments, wages. Short-term incentive, I think, probably the easiest way to describe a short-term incentive is that, that's your annual bonus or some sort of performance-based bonus for work, for accomplishing something. Some people assume that they're going to get it because it's built in. I worked at an investment bank for a couple of years early in my career, and the short-term incentive, the bonus, the annual bonus, was just part, like the Wall Street type thing. It's just part of it. You know and you expect to get that bonus, and everybody stays on board until they get the bonus. And so short-term incentive is essentially a bonus. Long-term incentive is something I'm going to spend a couple of minutes talking about. Other benefits are things like, perquisites, I would say, your vacation, holiday, flexibility, flex hours, insurance, get to, use the facilities sometime if the family's not using them, that sort of thing, other benefits. So I think the thing that's probably the least, or maybe the most interest, and especially the most interest to families, is the long-term incentives. And that's where I think that, if your salary and your short-term's in line, what is going on in the world around long-term incentives? And in fact, well, I'm going to talk about that today, and I'm going to talk about a case study that kind of goes through how a family that we work with dealt with all this. A deeper dive on long-term incentives is going to be what we're going to focus on. One of the topics we're going to focus on in our next webinar in June. So we're going to have more data around it, more actionable data for you all to take away from that session based upon some survey work that's underway right now. So we're pretty excited about what we'll be able to communicate to you in that next session. But long-term incentives, I think, these 5 things cover the long-term incentives pretty well. They're all used at different times and in different situations. Phantom stock is typically used by families where there's an operating company, and where the operating company, the fortunes, quote unquote, of the operating company drive the dividends paid into the family office for investment purposes, and also can drive the sense of well-being in the family office. And so oftentimes the family office is embedded in the operating company, and the family office executive may have or may play some role, some significant role in the capital asset allocation, with the family in the investment committee. So, for instance, we can dividend, money out of the operating company to the family office, and the family office can invest in private equity funds, or we can reinvest those dividends in a new business inside the operating company. So that's an example of the capital asset allocation decision. And when the family office executives are playing a role in determining that, by the way, that's terrific, because it is a total alignment, strategic alignment across all the elements of the family. There's no silo, and it's totally integrated. I mean, that's just awesome when that happens. And I work with a family right now where that does happen. It works really well. Phantom stock is used. Phantom stock's not real stock. It's not real equity. But it's tied, and it performs just like real equity, and you'll get options or be awarded phantom stock based upon performance of your performance and the performance of the operating company. Another way to create long-term incentives for a family office executive is carried interest in a deal, and more often than not, the family loans the money to the executives to finance the purchase of the interest, and maybe as a part of it they forgive the loan at some point, or there's some planning considerations that go in to the carried interest. But I mean, I think you're all familiar with carried interest. It's the way to defer, a very successful way under the tax code to defer income taxes, and I'd say here that it's limited to CIOs, but I've seen it applied to others in the office. Not typically, but it can be a way to reward other executives in the office. One of the challenges from the family's perspective is it just makes things a little more complicated, especially if you part ways with the executives. And so that's one of the things that you want to think about as a family member. Providing carried interest to an executive. Supplemental deferred comp. That's a way to for a small office to provide limited access to to one individual, let's say, and that's just a regular deferred compensation plan where the ownership interest is earned over time. Let's put it that way, and that can take a lot of different forms. But that again can be say ownership of what? I mean, that can be ownership in a number of different things. And so the point is that it's an earn in to sort of over a vesting period. One way that families provide long-term incentives is through investments, opportunities. Letting family office executives co-invest, and again, oftentimes that can be financed by the family. And then, of course, you've got the transaction bonuses that are paid out to staff when they're actively involved in some sort of M&A / investment banking. When the family is involved in a big deal and it takes many years to get it done, and some sort of transaction bonus is paid to the the team, the family office team that was involved. And that's some of my clients have been lucky enough to work with their family principals on those deals and to receive those transaction bonuses. So it does happen. In fact, I think I know I have clients that in every single case have had one, or had a client who's enjoyed one of these long-term incentives. And so if you're interested in knowing more about any one of these, give me a buzz and we can go in more depth. But on the next slide, I'm going to talk to you about how to focus on the overall process, back to the big picture. I spent a couple of minutes on long-term incentives, but back to the big picture about salary, short-term incentives, long-term incentives, other benefits, and quality of life. And I think when you're thinking about doing a comp program, you want to understand what it's costing you right now, and I think you probably do. But you also want to understand what it will cost you under what I would call a variety of circumstances, different scenarios. And you can build some financial models to evaluate what would happen in these different scenarios. So what do I mean? Well, let's say you said if these goals were achieved, then X gets done, right? And so what would it happen if none of those goals were achieved? And what would happen if 2 times those goals were achieved? That's what I mean. So, kind of create an upper and lower limit and understand what would happen to the compensation structure inside under different circumstances. I think it's really important to align the compensation with the interests of the family. And when I say the interests of the family, I mean their strategic vision. And I highly recommend that you use the balanced scorecard to do that alignment. Likewise, and fourth, meaningful targets, KPIs need to be established for the reward structure, the compensation reward structure. And again, using the balanced scorecard approach, I think allows you to focus on metrics that are not solely financial. So even if you're the CIO and your performance is primarily graded on the performance of the investment portfolio, risk-adjusted performance, it shouldn't only be evaluated on that, because I think that is kind of creating a silo for that CIO in the family office setting. The CIO needs to understand the risk profile and the emotional reaction to the allocation and the plans to change the allocation and the products, purchase, the buys and the sells in the allocation. I mean, all of those, those are just as important to manage by the investment officer as the performance of the portfolio. So meaningful targets for performance-based compensation, and also, I think it goes without saying that the targets should support short, midterm, and long-term plans, right? So if those are the 5 steps we're going to use to set our goals, what are the 5 objectives we're going to use to evaluate performance? And Clayton, let's go to the next slide. Well, I think that when you do evaluate your own program, you want to make sure that your program reflects paying for performance. So you want to have some sort of short-term incentive. You want to have some sort of long-term incentive. Exactly which long-term incentive, I think, depends. As we discussed, there's some different approaches. I think you need to make sure that your comp program meets a return on investment threshold that you determined back there when you were modeling. So whatever you do, whether it's buying a system, changing your business process, creating a new compensation program, educating your staff and your family members, you need to do an ROI on the activity. You need to show why the benefits, the net present value of the benefits at least equal the net present value of the costs. And I know sometimes it's hard to do an ROI when some of the the benefits and the costs are not are not dollar denominated, but you know what, you can figure it out and it can be done. We've done it, we do it a lot, and we're here to help you if you need help on ROI analysis. But third, you need to give consideration to performance-based financial and non-financial metrics. They need to be balanced appropriately. Now, that is, like I said, in the case of the CIO, it's going to have some non-financial metrics, but I don't know if it's 50-50. I think that would be improperly or inappropriately balanced. It's probably more like 80-20. But there needs to be some balance between the two. You need to consider whether compensation programs allow your office to actually retain and motivate your best, because that's the largest risk you have is the talent going down the elevator every night. And you know, it's not just money alone. Remember, it's not just salary and remember I said there's other benefits. There's quality of life out there. So part of that, all those things play into the compensation program. And you need to obviously to attract, you need to have a top tier comp program. And don't be afraid to seek out advice. It goes without saying. So before I get into the case study, let me ask one question, and that's up next, about long-term incentives. And that question is, which long-term incentive vehicles does your family office use? And select one, or if you none, or it's not applicable, accept that, or check that box. We'll be interested to see if any of these show up in our results. Clayton, do we have? Get through my case study. Yeah. Long-term incentives. Okay. Most do not have a long-term incentive plan in place. 6 out of 10. And if you, for those 6 out of the 10, if you think that you should have, obviously some of it's not applicable, but if you think you should have and want to discuss more, let me know. Be happy to provide you some pointers and can really give you kind of a frame for discussing this or introducing the concept to your principals. So let's do the case study now. And the case study is about a single-family office that we worked with a couple of years ago. And the focus of this case is really on the executive. And the executive had been in position for a while without any agreement. So it happens. People get caught up and sign on, and it's like we'll take care of that later, and that's good. And we just get going, and that's fine. I remind you of the two guys in oil and gas who worked together for 40 years without an agreement. Okay, that happens. But it also, at some point, becomes a sort of an elephant in the room where there is no agreement, and especially if the CEO feels like he or she is, the compensation is out of step with peers and with others in the industry. And and this was a pretty big office, $1 billion plus office, a lot of family members, a lot of staff, and I think the family rightly recognized that they needed, they had a salary in place, and I think the quality of life was there. The other benefits were there, but they needed some, they needed some long-term incentives to really be certain that they were going to retain the CEO in position. Our friends at Grant Thornton were engaged to work on this assignment. And by the way, we've worked over the years with Grant Thornton on a number of different engagements, and they're terrific. We are happy to report that we're working with an alum of Grant Thornton, Trish Botoff, on some compensation work, and we just completed a compensation study, which I'm sure most of you have seen, but if you haven't, it's on our website. Go out and check it out. Trish is going to be working with us in the June presentation around compensation. So we're going to have a really interesting webinar in June. But in these days, I think Trish was working at Grant, and her boss Bruce Benish, who's a terrific guy and knows a ton on this topic, and is, I would say, probably one of the best in the biz right now. I mean, there are other consultants out there. McLaughlin is one of those consulting firms that does this sort of work. But Grant does a great job, and they worked on this. And so the fact pattern that they were facing was this, that there's base salary and there were actual annual incentives, but there was really no long-term incentives. So if we can see that fact pattern, if we go to the next slide, where they started was really to benchmark the office versus market median, and this CEO was making $350 base salary. There was an annual bonus payment. So this is like a short term that was averaging around $300, and so total cash comp was $650. With some other compensation that was valued at $25, so total comp was $675. When the consultants went out and looked at the market, they found that base salary was a little bit low, but the annual incentive was a little bit high. So, not that far off on total comp. The mix of base salary and short-term incentive was different. Okay. Total cash comp was I think in line, within 4%. Where the big difference was in the long-term incentive plan, as you can see. The market median long-term incentive was $300,000. Now that's a considerable amount, 30% on top of the total cash comp, and made for a really different, I should say, a really major gap in the in the total comp of the CEO. So solution proposed, and that's the next slide, Clayton, was to adjust the base salary. Next slide, please. And also to to establish some new targets. So the salary was adjusted up so that the base salary is in line with the market, which makes sense. Salary is salary. You get that salary in this job or the one down the street. Assuming there is one down the street. But the key was also here was to adjust. And what they did was they worked with the family to adjust, establish incentive pay. Aligning it, with the market. Excuse me. The performance measures were established for this CEO at what you would call a threshold level, a target level, and a maximum level. So again, here's this modeling coming into place. And again, you see here in what the consultants recommended that there was a mix, a combination of financial measures and job performance. In other words, intangibles that would go into determining the base. The bonus opportunity. And so if this CEO achieved the 100% of target, that CEO would be right on the money with market median total comp at 675. Remember, 675 was a little bit more than what total comp was, for the CEO in the current year, based upon salary plus the annual incentive. So 675, and of course, if you did more, if they exceeded, if he or she exceeded the goals, then they would get more from the bonus, and less if didn't meet the goals. So let's take a look then at what the consultants recommended for the long-term incentive. And if you recall, the long-term incentive in the marketplace was, the market median was, I think, 300. And that's the number that they used for the target and benchmark target long-term incentive, 300. So basically what you're looking at is, we had the 675 from the last slide, plus the 300 is 975 for total direct comp, which puts us right, pretty right on the money there. With I think 992 was the total comp out of the marketplace. So that's right in line with with what market median was. So median, remember, is not the average. Median is right in the middle of the data points. So it's the 50% of the data points are above and 50% are below. So that was what the consultants recommended, and they I think had a very good approach, one that you could think about when you're modeling your compensation plan and thinking about how to align it with the market. The key is, where do you get that data from the market? So let's go on to the next slide and just reflect on the observations that came out of this. Retaining the executive was super high priority for the family, and they did that successfully. But the benchmarking on this position was really tough, and I know that's tough because it's really hard when you go and specify a particular position, especially at the senior level like that. It's really hard to find comparatives. And so what the consultants did was that they said, well, since we can't find single-family office comparisons, what we're going to do is go and draw upon publicly available data, which there are a number of databases out there that you can subscribe to or buy that will provide you with this sort of background data. And of course, if you're a big consulting firm, you can afford that, and you have to do that. That's part of what you do, in addition to referencing your own database. At Family Office Metrics, we don't have access to super expensive publicly available data, but we do have access to publicly available data that's relatively inexpensive. We'd be happy to share some of that data with you. And we also, based upon our work with over 160 family offices, have a pretty good feel, and through our continuous surveying of our clients, have a pretty good feel for what positions, what people in position earn, and also what those people do, because we know these people. They're our clients. Of course, there are geographical differences, and there are differences related to the activities and the roles that the CEOs and the C-levels play in the office. If you're the CEO of a family office, like I mentioned, like the one I mentioned before, who is involved in working with the family around family-wide capital resource allocation, that's a very different role than a CEO who is focused on managing, essentially financial control and lifestyle and um, you know, record keeping for a family who and where the investment portfolio has been outsourced. So it really depends on geography. It depends on scope. But we have a pretty good look into what active peers are making around the country in the family office industry. And stating again, performance metrics should be a combo of financial measures and individual executive kind of non-financial measures. So it worked out. The family had equity or carried interest that they could have granted to the executive, but they were concerned about how that was going to be an issue if they ever parted ways. And I think that's a completely reasonable consideration. Look, this was a set of steps, an approach that a family took to resolving a sort of a thorny issue, one of those things that needed to be talked about but never was, and in fact the only way that the executive was really able to deal with it was to get approval to bring in the consultants. So having a third-party independent view of the matter takes the sort of the personal energy out of the whole discussion, even though it's a very personal matter. Totally get that. But it sort of takes the personal energy out of the discussion with your principals if you're the CEO. And if you're the family member, it takes the personal energy out, because really this is a very, very important and critical discussion you're having with your CEO, or if you're the CEO, with your CFO. So that concludes the case study observations. And to wrap up, I'd like to ask one final question, and then we're going to go to Q&A. And this question is, what's your highest priority for implementing compensation program changes, assuming that you have a compensation program in mind to change, and or that any changes are afoot in your compensation program. So look forward to hearing your answer on this particular question, which is our final question. And if you've answered all these questions, you are qualified for the CPE credit. And remember, as Clayton said at the outset, that if you want the CPE credit, you need to ask for it at the end of the session today, and he will be happy to correspond with you on topic and get that all straightened out. So Clayton, do we have the answers? Well, very interesting. This is very, very interesting. If you're interested in talking about benchmarking, give us a buzz. If you are interested in long-term incentive plans, give us a buzz, and we can definitely add light to your thinking in both those areas. And we'll be happy if we are able to help you further. If we feel like you need a reference, a referral on, we'll be happy to do that. You're part of our network, and we want to help. So let us know what you're thinking there. Those of you who are thinking about hiring and recruiting new talent, definitely give us a call. I think I mentioned last time that there are a number of highly qualified search consultants who we have over the years referred business to with great success. If you don't have that list, I don't have that list right now in front of me, but it's on our website. It's in the last, the last webinar we did, so there's definitely people that you can refer to there. Or if you just want to give us a buzz, I'd be happy to share it with you directly. And of course, we'd be happy to talk to you about helping you in your hiring decision. So if you're looking to hire somebody, give us a buzz. Let us know. Next time, we're going to be talking about compensation structures and how to, to implement the most common approaches, and how to in much more depth go in measure and reward performance. I think today we talked and gave a case on long-term incentives. Next week we're going to go in depth in probably all 5 of those areas, maybe not all the same depth, but we're going to really look at some data that we've collected between now and then around what's going on in the marketplace, and we'll be in a position to share that with you. So it should be a really interesting webinar. As I mentioned, Trish Botoff is going to be presenting with me, and Trish is terrific, and she and I work together a lot. So we're delighted to share the webinar with her. So Clayton, do we have any questions? I think we got about 5 minutes.
Sure, yeah, we got a couple questions here. The first one says, how do you move a team from position descriptions to role charters?
Well, good question. But I think that it all goes back to my emphasis, maybe some would say overemphasis, on the concept of the balanced scorecard. And the balanced scorecard is the way that you describe the vision across all of the key areas of the business, financial, customer, operations, and knowledge and learning. And the position descriptions are supporting activities in potentially in all of those areas, but generally, focused in one of those areas. And the role charter is an evolution of the position description to focus less on tasks and more on objectives. So, for instance, the objectives might be, the objective might be to improve client service from a 3, from my average grade in the last measurement of 3 out of 5 to 3.5 out of 5. Or it might be we'll never have, at no time will the client service grade ever fall below 3. So you could, additionally, you could reference the ownership of responsibilities, like, I am responsible for the management of client service quality for the family office. As opposed to influencing. Somebody else, the CFO might say, I'm a participant in the client service, or I influence the client service outcome for the family office. So I think it's moving from specific tasks to goals and the representation of goals as they relate using the balanced scorecard to the overall vision for the family office.
All right, we've got one more question here. Do you have position description templates that you could use to document our office's team?
Oh, you think somebody's asking me if I would share a position description template? Or role
chart? Do you have any of those that
sure. Yeah, we'll take that, if that person didn't identify himself or herself, have them ID, and we'll definitely send. We've got them.
Okay. All right. And let me ask you one final question here. In the case study, you mentioned market data was best. Where did you get that for the family office CEO?
Yeah, so the market data that we get for the family office CEO comes from our survey of family office CEOs. And we know about 200 of them. And so we're in touch with them on a regular basis, and we are in process right now of doing a survey to gather market data based on 12/31/14 comp.
All right, well, that's the last question I have here. So.
Okay. Well, thanks, everybody, for attending our webinar today. Appreciate you taking the time. Look forward to talking with you about any of these topics that we covered today or anything else. And if we don't see you before, we'll see you again on June 10th at 10 a.m. for our next webinar, Rewarding and Compensation Structure. So see you then. Thank you. Bye-bye.